Good morning and welcome everyone to the April 7th, 2021 meeting of the Oregon Ocean Science Trust. Just want to remind everyone that this is a public meeting. It will be recorded and uploaded to the DSL YouTube channel after we are done. So let's see, we will go ahead and start with some introductions. We'll start with our board members and then members of the public and guests who are speaking. You can just introduce yourself by name and organization. I'll give you a more thorough introduction when we have you coming up for your time on the agenda. So I will start. I'm Laura Anderson. I am the director of the Oregon Ocean Science Trust. And I'll just call off, that makes it easy. Jim.
Jim Sumich, Oregon Ocean Science Trust trustee.
And Steve.
Thanks, Chair. Steve Marks, member of the Oregon Ocean Science Trust.
And Shelby.
Shelby Walker, member of the trust.
Okay, and so we are, and Christina.
Good morning, Christina Volniakovsky, member of the Ocean Science Trust.
And we are the voting members of the trust. We are all present, so we do have a quorum. There are two non-voting members of the trust. Senator Dick Anderson is our newest non-voting member, and Representative David Gomberg is a long-term member of the trust as well. As we all know, session is in full swing right now and their availability is limited. If by chance they're able to join us, I may even go so far as to interrupt one of our speakers to make sure that we introduce and recognize them. They may only have 15 minutes or something to join us today, if at all. I will just say very briefly that I did meet with Senator Dick Anderson in advance of this meeting, and he's really excited to be part of this group. And as a 20-year coastal resident of Lincoln City and the former mayor of Lincoln City, he's very well versed in coastal issues and also very committed to our cause. So I'm excited to welcome him, and I'm sure we'll be seeing more of him when session is over. And also Representative Gomberg, who we hope will join us. Our speakers today, we'll just do a quick introduction. Lisa.
Lisa Gaines, I direct the Institute for Natural Resources.
Great, and we have also Davia.
Morning, everybody. Davia, Palmeri, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Okay, I don't see Dr. Carl Winter on yet. He's possibly joining us. Okay, and then staff today, Lonnie.
Hi, I'm Lonnie Amadian, and I'm here to provide executive support for the call.
And Andrea.
Morning, everybody. Andrea Celentano, Oregon Department of State Lands. I'm here in case anybody has any questions or if the department needs to provide any other support.
Great. And Ted?
Ted Bright, or Department of State Lands IT.
Thank you. And it looks like we have two public members today. If you would introduce yourself and maybe just tell us your organization or interest. Allison. And we don't have a picture or audio for Allison. Oh, there we go. And you're on mute, Allison. We can't hear you, you're on mute. I'm gonna switch over to Nadia if you want to see if your mic can turn on. Nadia?
Hi, my name is Nadia Gardner. I live up on the North Coast and I support independent contractor for the Oregon Ocean Conservation Fund of the Oregon Community Foundation.
Hi, thanks for joining us. Great. Is there anyone else on the call or anyone that I missed? All right. That's good. We need to approve the minutes from the previous meeting that was sent out to the board members yesterday. Have you all had a chance to review the minutes?
Move approval.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Second, any comments or questions before the vote? All right, so all in favor of approval of the meeting minutes from January 27, 2021, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Didn't think so. Passes unanimous. Great. So that takes us into our first agenda item. I am really excited to hear from today's first speaker, Lisa Gaines. This is the first time I've actually had a conversation with Lisa, so this is going to be exciting for me too. Lisa is the director of the Institute for Natural Resources. She's going to tell us a little bit more about that program that's located between Oregon State University and Portland State University. A little that I learned about Lisa just from cyber searching is that she has a lot of experience working with universities, with NGOs and government agencies to manage these multi-institutional kinds of projects and programs, particularly as it relates to running science review teams and facilitating planning and policy research. So she's bringing a lot of experience to our Marine Reserves assessment process and is managing the proposal review process along with Dr. Shelby Walker. And I'm just really grateful for those services. This is something that if we didn't have INR, that if UST had to have capacity to do internally, it would have taken a big lift for us to get there. So it's wonderful that we have these resources in our state and at a very reasonable cost, I will add, which is just a real boon to the project. So Lisa, without further introduction, I'll just invite you to go ahead and tell us a little bit more, and you should be able to use your screen share button openly as you may desire to share any presentation or materials with us.
Fantastic. Thank you for that introduction. It's nice to be here. I have worked with some of you before in the past, and or INR has worked with some of you before in the past, and this will be a really wonderful way to be able to maybe share some of the breadth of the type of work that we do. And I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go to a presentation and get this going for all of us. So as was mentioned, I direct the Institute for Natural Resources, and we are the only university institute that is located on more than one campus. So we are located at Oregon State University and at Portland State University. And also on our board, the Vice President of Research from the University of Oregon sits on our board. And our main goal and what we were put into place by the legislature was to put data and information and make it more publicly available. Data, science-related data from the universities, from agencies that cross institutions and cross agencies themselves. So what we primarily do is what we say is science delivery. Many folks within the university system work on science discovery. They are doing the basic and foundational research. And we try to look at what information, what research, what data have people produced, and how can we make it publicly accessible? So to some degree, we do the work that no one else has the time for. So we have our agencies managing and doing stuff on the ground. We have our researchers doing a lot of research. And how do we actually knit those two together? We do that through managing data and information, linking the science to decision-making, providing technical assistance, and conducting research. And I'll tell you a little bit more about each of these aspects of what we do. So how we determine that we focus our work, we really focus on these three big areas: biodiversity and conservation, large landscapes, and water. And why these areas? We might do things related to forestry specifically or other aspects, but people tend to think, if we think about forestry, people think about the Oregon State University College of Forestry. If people think about water, they can think about folks at Oregon State University, at Southern Oregon University, at the Portland State University, et cetera. So we try to focus on these issues that are multi-jurisdictional in terms of agency and multi-university in terms of the colleges and the universities themselves. I'll tell you a little bit about our sister institute. Our sister institute is the Institute for Water and Watersheds, and this is the state's Water Research Institute as put into place by the Federal Water Resources Act of 1964. This group really focuses on research with groundwater, surface water, and conflict resolution, and capacity building, how they work with undergraduate students and graduate students to do research-related work. We tend to join with them when we start thinking about public access to water data. We share the same office space, we share the same board, and we move forward. And there is quite a good relationship too between the Institute for Water and Watersheds and Oregon Sea Grant, as in several states, Sea Grant and the similar institution, Water Resources Institute in other states, are sometimes combined. We tend to work in partnership with Sea Grant. Within the Institute for Natural Resources is our Oregon Biodiversity Information Center. This is what was formerly known as the Natural Heritage Information Center, of which there is one in each state. And ours is located within within the Institute for Natural Resources. We do a lot when it comes to data management and modeling and mapping, and we are connected to a national group through a group called NatureServe and the NatureServe Network. Our work really focuses on rare and invasive and threatened and endangered species. From this standpoint, we do a number of things. For the state, we develop the Natural Areas Plan for the state of Oregon, and it's done on a 5-year cycle, and that is put in state law. These natural area programs and the data and information are used for research and to measure biodiversity that really signify the biodiversity of the state of Oregon. We also are in charge of putting out the rare, threatened, and endangered species of Oregon to list all of these species, their distribution, and we do this on a 3-year cycle. We don't do this alone. We do this in partnership with state and federal agencies, and we move forward with providing this information and making it public. One of the things we also do, and a gentleman in our office, who I believe Davia knows, is named Jimmy Kagan. He worked with a series of folks to evaluate the Lamphere Malal dunes in Humboldt County, California. And it was and it was an evaluation to see whether or not this would be a national natural heritage site and a natural landscape site, of which it was rewarded in 2021 to become a national natural heritage site or landmark based on the work that came out of the Institute for Natural Resources. So we saw that as a really wonderful thing to show this exhibit for the Klamath-Siskiyou coastal dunes example. But now I'm going to go into a little bit of what we do on the ground. When we come to our work, we think about managing data and information. And our idea is to make it discoverable, to make it accessible, to make it interpreted, and to make it usable. And how we do that is, this is a graphic of a number of ways that we do this. That outer ring are the individuals and groups who produce data and or use data. They're often the same groups of people, but sometimes they might not be able to float between agencies, et cetera. So sometimes our data producers are also our data users. Why do they produce and use data? Obviously to fulfill management plans, to fulfill various regulations, to think about many other things of policy. And what we do is we try to collect this data depending on what people need it for. We collaborate with our data users and producers, and we compile everything. And then what we want to do is figure out how can we integrate it and put it in a format that makes sense to the type of questions people are asking. Like I said, we are about data delivery, not data discovery. We look at what currently exists and think, what is the best use of available science? What is the best use of available data? And we really want to make it clear, we aren't trying to say we need to use the best stuff, because we can't always determine. There's a lot of controversy. But when we have a lot of data, how do we determine what it's appropriate to be used for? So the types of data that we tend to work on and collect end up being community-based data, geospatial, land use and cover, larger biodiversity, plants, wildlife, etc. And ultimately, we provide access to this through either data sets, databases, maps, and tools. One of the products that is highly visible is the IMAP invasives, and we manage this for the state of Oregon, where people can report and we can track invasive species throughout the state. We also help to do the technical work for the Oregon Invasive Species Council. What is really great about this is that it provides a nexus of information where groups, planners such as soil and water conservation districts can come to this information and utilize it for their plans when they might not have the capacity to do it individually. So we think of that efficiency about how we can understand our invasive species. It's available online, anybody can use it. And we also use iNaturalist, so more of a citizen science group. The other thing that we do that's very publicly facing is our Oregon Explorer, which is a natural resources digital library. And we do this in partnership with the Oregon State University Libraries. We create a number of tools, maps, they are interactive, they are stories, they are articles where anybody in Oregon, the United States, the world that has internet access can access this information. When we develop this information, we don't develop it because we want to, we develop it because we are asked to. And that ends up being our purview. If we are asked to do things by state agencies and NGOs, and they can help support it with some funding, we actually engage in that work. And I can explain our funding model later on if you are interested in hearing that. So for instance, just a couple of things that have come out recently is a huge wildfire risk explorer and reporters, that tool that communities are using to understand where they are in the landscape and do their fire plans. We have worked with DLCD to create a coastal research explorer. This now, we created the infrastructure for it. The Department of Land Conservation and Development is maintaining it along with a student. And I believe they might have come to the Oregon Ocean Science Trust, maybe sometime for funding to fund a student to help maintain that. And we work with the Oregon Coast and Ocean Information Network. We do some data and display data regarding communities around the state, as well as a wildlife explorer. Our wildlife explorer goes beyond the wildlife that might be mentioned in the Oregon Conservation Strategy. So for instance, I'm going to talk to you about some of the communities. So we have this Community Explorer tool. We do this with Oregon State University Extension. They are the individuals that think about some of the content and as well as the outreach. There are over 60 indicators that we track that really talk about Oregon's communities. This was funded in part by the Ford Family Foundation, and maybe you might be or might not be familiar with their publication, which is Oregon by the Numbers. So we end up being the silent partner of Oregon by the Numbers that display a lot of demographic, natural resources, and community information on a county by county basis. We've heard rumored that they might come to us too and want to get this document also displayed through the Oregon Explorer to get it more utilized throughout the state.
Lisa,
I'm sorry?
Is it possible that I could just take a quick break here? As we mentioned, we didn't know what the availability of our senator and representative would be, and we were just joined by Senator Dick Anderson, not knowing if he has 2 minutes with us or 2 hours with us. If I could just take a quick moment.
Absolutely. Would you like me to stop sharing my screen so everybody can see everybody?
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Hi, good morning, Senator Anderson.
Well, good morning. Well, afternoon now. Sorry for my lateness. I just got off the floor, so I came back up to the office to get on this meeting. So, thank you for your giving me some attention anyway.
Well, I can imagine it's very busy at the Capitol every day. I did introduce that I've got an echo. I don't know if that's coming through to the rest of you. Perhaps you mute your, there you go. That helped. So I did introduce a little bit that you're District 5 new senator and introduce that you've been on the coast with your wife for over 20 years and the former mayor of Lincoln City. I did not mention, but perhaps it's notable that in your very first term here, you were on a number of committees, not the least of which is the Joint Committee on Ways and Means and the Joint Committee on Legislative Policy and Research, as well as Housing and Development, Human Services, Mental Health and Recovery, a lot of very powerful committees. So if you'd like just to take a couple moments, maybe just to introduce yourself a little further, and then we'll continue with Dr. Gaines's presentation.
Well, thank you. And Laura, you did an excellent job. I don't know what more I would say. You know, other than I have spent 12 years actually with local government in Lincoln City, twice as mayor, 2 terms. So 6 years of that 12. But you know, I'm very interested in certainly all things that happen on the coast, and certainly that body of water itself. You know, as I campaign for this position, and as I serve, I continue to talk to people about that my first priority is actually the coast, and I've felt that it has been forgotten, and gets kind of looked over by most legislation, and I hope to make that you know, shine a light on the coast and our activities and needs, and distinguish a little differently those needs. So I'm anxious to learn even more about the you know, the trust. Laura has been gracious enough to spend some time with me and try to get me up to speed. You know, she even gives me a cup of coffee in her restaurant. So, you know, that's worked well. So, you know, I appreciate, want to learn, and as a result, then see if there isn't things I can do, because one of the or 2 committees that I do sit on are also, besides the full Ways and Means, is the Ways and Means Subcommittee for Natural Resources and the Ways and Means Subcommittee for General Government. So I'm getting a good look at all the agencies in the state and how they operate or don't, and where they reach. So I'm hoping to be more of an ally for you as I learn more and more. So thank you. Thanks for the time.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us, Senator, and hopefully you can stay with us for the rest of the meeting, but I'm sure that just depends on when duty calls. And thank you, Dr. Gaines, for letting me interrupt your wonderful presentation. I apologize for that, making you break it up there, but I think we'd be happy to resume that now if you are so inclined.
Absolutely. No apology needed. No apology needed at all. So I'll go back to this. And one thing I do want to say about the Oregon by the numbers before I go on to the next screen is I misspoke. It wasn't 60 indicators. So there are about 30 to 60 sources that we get the information. It's over 600 indicators that we end up tracking so people can understand their communities. So I wanted to let you know that we do work that think about communities, the human side, as well as the natural resource side of Oregon. We work with the Oregon Department of Administrative Services, their Geospatial Information Group, and we house a lot of the infrastructure for information that they deliver publicly. Sometimes it's easier for folks to go through us because we aren't restricted to their website restrictions of the state. And like we said, we can combine various data from across the state. This is our Oregon Spatial Data Library, and in 2018, it was reviewed. It was considered one of the top 4 in the United States in terms of people being able to access all sorts of data and download. It's used quite a bit around the state. I believe when they did one tracking of this, it was over 100 million hits that it would get from the work that we do from throughout the state. It has data and information, like we said, related to the enterprise zones, bridges, from tide gates to all sorts of information. And oftentimes planners download this information, help analyze it and use it in the plans that they are developing around the state, not only at the county level, but at the city level, and as well as at the state level. What we're doing right now is we are working with the Geo Enterprise Office to combine this with our Imagery Explorer, which comes from the National Agricultural Information data, to look at imagery across the state. So you can compare across years, how does that match up to this other spatial data? A really wonderful resource that is available, like we said, free to everybody and anybody who has internet service. When it comes to linking science to decision making, I just want to mention a couple things. All of the work that we do, that's the goal. We are rewarded by how we can put usable, accessible information to the public. But in this section, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do for science reviews and convening. And as you mentioned, Laura, one of the things that we are doing is to help with the request for proposal process for the Oregon Marine Reserves assessment. And that's a new area of work for us, and we're very excited to add that to our portfolio of work. Another area that we have been doing that I wanted to mention to you that is coastal is that the Institute for Natural Resources, along with Creative Solutions, won one of the awards to help facilitate developing the implementation plan for the Mid-Coast. And it is one of the 4 place-based planning areas for water. The other 3 are Harney, the Upper Grand Ronde, the Lower John Day, and then the Mid-Coast. And so it was a many-year process. We've been available and working with folks for about a year. Also on our team is a member of Sea Grant, who is helping with some of the technical aspects, Sam Chan, and also Oregon State University, Derek Godwin. It's a great project team working with a number of great dedicated community members in the Mid-Coast to help put this implementation plan into place. I wanted to share with you, if you haven't seen this about the Mid-Coast, is that this was done by the GIS Blue Group, and it's a story map. And this story map basically takes all of the science information that the Mid-Coast Partnership worked, the technical documents, to make it accessible and readable by the general public. Some of the natural resources technical documents are hundreds of pages long, and we all recognize that not many people are going to be able to sit down and read that in an afternoon. But how can we make it digestible? So this is one thing. It's not a product of the Institute for Natural Resources, nor Sea Grant, nor Extension. We helped with some of the verbiage, but it's a wonderful piece of work that I highly recommend if you get an opportunity to go through to see that. It's very interactive. When it comes to our science and advisory services, we really operate along this wonderful bubble flower. And it's basically, how do we start moving processes through? And what we are very interested in is when it comes to science reviews, we help manage the process. We help think about how do we move a question that people are interested in, the discovery of that information, getting a science panel in place, reviewing that information, coming up with either a state of the art of the science or a review of the science, and making it digestible and usable to whomever had requested it. We do not do science reviews on our own. Science review questions and convening come to us as a service that we offer this state. So recently, some things, we did a knowledge synthesis for tide gate upgrades and the ecological impacts of those. Out of that came a tide gate inventory that is housed on our spatial data library that is available to anybody. We helped organize the process with, it was sponsored by the Oregon Forest Resources Institute, a science review of forest management and drinking water. And then for the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, there was a very large movement about thinking about the science behind river restoration and stage 0. And we conducted a large science symposium for that. So those are just a couple of recent examples of some work that we've done as we think about science synthesis. What we also do is this technical assistance and analysis, which really focuses on mapping, remote sensing, and modeling. How do we help shape information that is currently existing so that people can think about different scenarios as they decide or choose to plan and manage their property and lands? I wanted to show you this slide because this was done by a woman in our office, Dr. Megan Kreutzberg, who is a phenomenal landscape ecologist and really great with maps. And oftentimes people wonder, when do we use maps and what are they good for? And what's the appropriate questions we should ask? And she was asked to do a 5-minute presentation to the Society of Rangeland Managers about a month ago. And this is just one of her principal slides. But what I liked about this, and I wanted to share, is these are the sorts of questions we go through when we work with state agencies or landowners, and they're interested in using these models or maps. What sort of questions do we want to have? And what's the appropriate tool, map, model to be able to help address these questions? So I just wanted to be able to display this. If she ever gets a chance to present again, we'd highly recommend it. I think we got a recording of it, so we'll put it on our website as well when it comes to the use of maps. Why I wanted to mention is that we are a big producer of maps for a number of audiences. One of the maps that we were asked to do, we continue to do this, is this historical vegetation mapping. Oftentimes when individuals are planning on whatever level, they want to know what were the conditions of the vegetation before we were here. And before we were here can mean a property owner change. It could mean a century, it could mean a decade, things along that line. And how do we want to manage if we want to restore some of our natural habitat? How do we manage it if we want to make sure that we can mitigate for invasive species, et cetera? It's a big project that we continue to do for the state of Oregon. We were asked, another individual, when it comes to high textured resolution mapping. This came, and this is an absolutely gorgeous product that, that was a very long time in the making and got many national accolades, and hopefully it will also spread for the National Park Service around the United States, about this detailed maps of millions of acres of rugged land that we cannot actually physically ground truth. We can't always send teams of technical experts into a very remote area to let us know what is on the ground, what is the cover of the vegetation, what are the stream systems like, et cetera. So how could we do this through remote sensing? We do work like this. When we do it for one agency or one group of people or organizations, our main goal is to say, how can this work be transferred and translatable to other applications? We had a project that came to us out of the US Forest Service when we had the Recovery Act from 2009. And it was an economic development project. We were awarded about $5 million to help the Forest Service look at all lands in Oregon, Washington, Arizona, and New Mexico, and develop some models about how they can do some scenario testing so that they can develop plans. So plans are developed, for instance, in the Blues Mountains here in Oregon. Some of the Southern Oregon forest restoration collaboratives have done this work. So work that we centralized in Oregon spread to other states. And as we know is coming soon, that's mentioned here, as we'll be working in Nevada, Utah, Southern Idaho, and Wyoming to use the work that we developed in Oregon to help the Forest Service determine their national forest plans, all thinking about vegetation and scenario building. And lastly, as you may be familiar with, is the SageCon partnership with looked at sage grouse. We've been working with landowners, with state and federal agencies, with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and others to continue thinking about sagebrush and sage grouse habitat, with the intent of keeping the sage grouse off of the endangered species list, allowing landowners to be able to manage and be active on their lands and to not violate any issues that might require this animal to be listed on the Endangered Species Act. And lastly, we do a number of things regarding conducting research. We tend not to conduct research in the sense of what a faculty member might do. We actually conduct research on 2 species, and those species are, and it's not going to be the appropriate picture, and some vegetation research. So let me talk about the vegetation research first. I apologize, I had my slides mixed up. This is a very large project that we've been doing for the Bureau of Land Management, and it's been looking at vegetation and soil monitoring across Eastern Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Nevada, now Montana. And it has been helping a lot with the BLM to think about their wildfire plans, to help with the NRCS with working lands, etc. This is a wonderful project in that we've been able to train a number of early career researchers to work with us over the last 4 years. And we've done about 3,000 plot assessments in these areas, and it's been about $6 million of funding. And with the state of the work that we've been doing out of the Institute for Natural Resources, we were also asked to train people in 4 other states to follow the methodology that they've liked that we've been doing for the BLM. Our research that looks at assessment regards the Pacific Fisher. This is not the Pacific Fisher, but one of our cameras happened to have caught this cougar, and we thought it was really great. But it's really looking at how private and public forests can manage their land, also with thinking about conservation of the Pacific Fisher. And the last bit of research that we do is on the snowy plover, and this is all about conservation work. And with some of the work that we've been doing across the states, we have been able to move the population of the snowy plover from approximately 35 to over 700 along the coast. So that's the breadth of the sort of work that we do when we think about science delivery for decision-making, for communities, et cetera. And we believe that we have a couple of really critical services, and that is that we provide this to this information that crosses multiple authorities, and we make it free and accessible to the public. We have a set of in-house technical experts that can help out, that follow our methodology for map making and information sharing. We really try to do that idea of promoting the best available data. How do we make that usable in many different circumstances for different management and policy questions? And then we provide opportunities when they come for our student population to hopefully have careers in natural resources. So I will stop there with my quick overview about the breadth of what INR does and how the legislature put us into place. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you, Lisa. That's incredible. What a huge value this is to the state of Oregon and the Western region as a whole. It's so interesting to me that the work that you're doing is so important to the state, particularly as I was a former commissioner of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and a lot of the species that you're working on are species that are really front and center for the state in terms of dealing with endangered species listings and a lot of these things. And yet I feel like I didn't really know INR at all. It's like kind of like I see you as like an unsung hero of Oregon, quietly working in the background to really facilitate better decision making for so many of us. So needless to say, I'm so glad that we have a strong partner in you. I do want to open it up to questions first to our board members. If any member of the public would like to ask a question, if you would type your name into the chat bar, I will call on you in order as we have time available on the agenda. So, but first of all, to our board members, do you have questions for Dr. Gaines? Steve? And then Christina.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, Dr. Gaines, for the presentation. It was great to learn about INR. I knew a little bit, but certainly got a taste of a lot of what you're up to. I have a question in particular regarding to the some of the data resources, data management functions that you provide, and in particular with respect to the coastal zone. And I am wondering, so with the Oregon Explorer tool and the data viewing tool that you've got here online, I'm wondering if that website or that tool is pulling from some of the same metadata sources that we would see if we looked on like Oregon Coastal Atlas or some of the other data, some of the other mapping and GIS tools that are available for ocean and coastal resources. And and I guess that gets at to the question is about where is the data coming from? Are you, are these tools both pulling from the same data, or are you housing and pulling from a different data set than maybe what the Oregon Coastal Atlas or the West Coast Ocean Portal, some of those online tools are pulling from?
Absolutely. We do not house data. We pull from other sources. That is our main thing that we don't want to, because number one, I don't think we would have the capacity to be able to house data with so much data out there. One area that we're hoping to shall we say, beef up quite a bit are two areas. Working with Sea Grant, whenever we get an opportunity to figure out, can we actually display some of the information that Sea Grant produces and also have an access point through the Oregon Explorer, and then areas of water. But if you're interested in the exact resources, I can write a question, I can get you the exact metadata and all the resources we pull from Miraca McCune and or Janine Salwasser, who lead that program.
Great, thank you. Maybe something we can follow up with offline. I've got your contact info.
Absolutely,
Curious.
and please call me Lisa.
Okay.
I meant to say that earlier, please call me Lisa. I did see a question about folks wanting to have a copy of this presentation. Absolutely. Happy to do so.
Christina, you had a question?
Yes, well, thank you, Lisa. That was excellent. I'm glad to know that we'll get a copy of the PowerPoint. And Steve actually asked my question because I know there's lots of data out there and I just wasn't quite clear whether you house the data or you are aware of the data, where it exists and can provide links to it or manage it, because a lot of the work that you're doing is so practical and publicly available. I was just wondering like where that data actually exists. So thanks for that clarification.
You bet. And sometimes like we would love this to be, we think it's a very robust site when it comes to the Oregon Explorer and being able to access the information. We are, like I said, we are put into place by the legislature, as are you all. We are funded, we are probably about 95% soft funded. So our budget ends up probably being maybe what we get is maybe $200,000 a year, and the rest we have to raise on our own. So when we raise on our own is the projects that people come to us. So for instance, if someone came to us and saying, we'd like something more combined with what's all these other resources with the coastal resources of data, the existing resources that we have, other mapping facilities, but we want it combined into something that shows on the Oregon Explorer, we would work with a group of people to get that funded and then move that forward. And if we create any tools, the question would be, how could we make any tool that we create for this one specific thing usable for something else? And let me give you an example. So we created an Oregon, a SageCon development siting or planning tool. So landowners on the east side can determine where they might not, where's the best place to develop without interfering with sage grouse, leks, seasonal habitat, et cetera. Based on that tool, we were approached by the Oregon Aquaculture Association and through COMS, which Shelby, do you know what COMS actually stands for?
It's the Center for Ocean and it's the Ocean and Marine Experiment Station.
Coastal
something
with Gil Sylvia.
Coastal Ocean. Yes, it's got the Coastal to Ocean, the Experiment Station in it.
Okay. So we are working with COMS, with the Oregon Aquaculture Association. We had a grant from Oregon Business and now from Sea Grant NOAA to help develop an aquaculture investment tool that's usable. That is based off of work that we did for the sage grouse. Also, we're developing a siting tool for renewable energy for the Department of Defense and the Oregon Department of Energy itself, to make sure that when people are developing energy sites for renewable energy, that they might not interfere with military operations, provide economic development opportunities, et cetera. So in line with what we're thinking about the coast, is we think if we develop anything new, how can it expand basically to other areas of interest?
So just a quick comment here. So I think I've known Lisa since I arrived at OSU like 7 years ago. And I've always had this idea of what INR has done, but this was fantastic to give, a really solid overview of all of the capacity that you have. And I'm really delighted about the connection that you have with OCOIN. And with respect to sort of the Sea Grant data, that's where we encourage our supported researchers to put their data, their stories. So it's really good to see that partnership there as well. And of course, we're very, as chair of the Science and Technical Advisory Committee, I am very grateful that INR has agreed to help work with us on the proposal review process for the Marine Reserves Assessment.
You're welcome. Thanks so much. This was fun.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, Lisa. I know based on our previous conversation, you have another meeting to get to, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll be continuing to work through our Marine Reserves assessment and hopefully have some more work to do together in the future.
Great, thank you. And I'll try to stay on as long as possible to hear Davia's presentation, and then I need to shove off.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just going to check in a moment here on the schedule. We do want the opportunity for our board members to introduce themselves to Senator Anderson, as well as we already got that introduction. So maybe we could just take a minute apiece, more than just the I'm a member of the trust, but maybe just a little bit about your background, your current work or previous work, so that Senator Anderson can start to get to know us a little bit better. So Dr. Winter and Davia, if you'll indulge us for just a few moments, we'll take a quick opportunity here. I get the thumbs up from Davia. I like that emoji. All right, I'm just gonna start at the top of my screen and work over. So Jim, would you like to start? Oh, you gotta unmute yourself, sir.
My background generally is in marine biology and oceanography, and I am still currently a member of the Marine Mammal Institute at Newport, and I serve on the board of the Ocean Acidification Hypoxia Council.
Thank you. And Steve?
Thanks, Chair Anderson, and nice to meet you, Senator Anderson. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today. My name is Steve Marks. I work for the Pew Charitable Trusts, and I work on a variety of coastal habitat and fisheries issues on the West Coast and in the North Pacific and Alaska. In Oregon, primarily working on conservation of submerged aquatic vegetation like kelp and eelgrass, and looking at Oregon's estuary management, trying to engage on those issues. So thanks again very much. Nice to meet you.
All right, Shelby.
Good afternoon, Senator Anderson. I'm Shelby Walker. I'm the director of Oregon Sea Grant. As I mentioned, I also chair the Science and Technical Advisory Committee on the Oregon Ocean Policy Advisory Council, and also serve on the Oregon Ocean Policy Advisory Council. And I'm fortunate enough to also work with Jim on the OAH Council.
All right, and Christina.
Thank you. And thank you, Senator Anderson, for joining us today. I'm Christina Volniakowski, and I work at the Columbia River Gorge Commission. It's my day job, but I've been on the Science Trust from the beginning, and I've did my graduate work in marine biology and oceanography, and then worked in coastal ecosystems along the whole West Coast up to Alaska for many years. So this is a really important opportunity for us to look at the Oregon coast and figure out what are the research needs and what we can do to make a difference.
It's just so impressive to me what a great group of people we have working on this organization. And I just think about when I look at the work that INR is doing, that OCOIN's doing, that ODF&W is doing, just constantly thinking about what's our niche, what's our special role, how do we add to this, this great group of assets that we have here in Oregon. So Yeah, Senator Anderson, thank you. And I just want to say, I'm sure that you were very relieved to have the election over, but I'll say I was also very relieved because finally all of those signs that said Anderson for senator in my town went down. I can't tell you how many people I had come into the restaurant saying, Laura, are you running for office? Different Anderson.
Well, I apologize for all those. That's part of the game.
That's right.
Bigger is better, evidently, in campaigning anyway. But really, thank you. And you're right. It's a very impressive group, and I hope to learn a lot from you and be of assistance. So thank you for taking the time. I will be jumping off. I've got a 1 o'clock committee meeting, so I'll be jumping off for that. But keep me in the loop if you would.
We sure will. All right, we're going to jump to the next part of our agenda, which is learning more about the Oregon Recreation and Conservation. Why is this escaping me now? Fund. Like it's not a foundation, it's a fund. So we have Davia Palmeri and Dr. Carl Wenner here to speak with us. Quick introduction for both of them. Davia Palmeri is the Conservation Policy Coordinator for ODF&W, and she's been before OOST with Dr. Karen Braby on other issues before. We've seen her. Davia is a conservation biologist by training with a lot of interest in climate adaptation and has done a lot of research in that. She has her degree from Columbia University. And what I really enjoyed learning about Davia as I was cyber stalking her this morning is that she interned for the Bureau of Land Management before her graduate degree. If I'm incorrect, correct me please, Davia, but she surveyed sand dune lizards, lesser prairie chickens, least terns, and Kunzler hedgehog cacti and falcons in southeast New Mexico for endangered species legislation. And she has netted and tagged cave swallows in Carlsbad caverns. So I found that very interesting about your background, Davia. I will also take this time to introduce Dr. Carl Wenner. He is the chair of the OCRF committee. He lives in Klamath Falls, where he has a very large cattle ranch and barley farm. And in addition to his medical education, he has a Master's of Science in Wildlife Ecology from the University of Florida. And he worked as a waterfowl biologist in Florida before becoming a medical doctor. He's been involved in a lot of committees, including the Klamath Basin Working Group and the Nature Conservancy, the Watershed Enhancement Board, and several Klamath partnerships. And I'm sure that there are dozens more in your background, Dr. Wenner. But with that, I would invite you to go ahead and just co-present in any order or fashion you choose.
Laura, thank you for that introduction. We really appreciate the opportunity to address this group. Laura, what I thought we would do, we were not going to need to take the whole time, but I thought Davia might give a little brief history of how the OCRF came to be. Then I can fill you in on what has happened more recently. And then we can have a discussion about how we can work with you in particular regarding the Marine Reserve project and fundraising and where we might be able to fit in with that. Does that sound like a reasonable plan for you, Laura?
Sounds great to me.
Great. Well, again, I'd like to introduce Davia, who's just been an incredible asset to us, and we wouldn't be where we are without her. And I thought she could give us a quick run through of our history and how we were established.
Thanks, Carl. And Laura, thanks for that cyber stalking fun. I feel like one of the important things to point out for me is I grew up in New York, very close to the ocean and the Long Island Sound. And I lived in New Mexico right after college, and the reason I had to go back to New York was the ocean. I missed the ocean. So just thought you all should know, despite that desert experience, I'm an ocean girl. And so, as Laura said, I work for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And one of my primary areas of focus is helping the department pay for conservation and the important work that we need to do. And some of the history of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and our sort of predecessor agencies throughout the last 125 plus years is that we were sort of set up, and a lot of state fish and wildlife agencies around the country were set up at a time when the primary threat to our fish and wildlife was overharvest. And, thinking of the Teddy Roosevelt era of conservation. And we really, over the last 125 years, have done a really successful job of creating a system of sustainable harvest, particularly in the oceans, but also with our terrestrial wildlife through our permitting processes and our licenses and sort of complex regulation. We've done a really great job. But in the last 25 to maybe even 50 years, it's been really apparent that there's a lot of other species that are not of commercial or recreational harvest interest that are really where our attention is needed. Department of Fish and Wildlife is tasked with managing our State Endangered Species Act. And then we have the Oregon Conservation Strategy, which is just a broad, comprehensive look at all of the state species, which is over 850 species. And the Oregon Conservation Strategy identifies species of greatest conservation need, those species we should be putting attention to now to prevent them from becoming threatened and endangered. And so we're really in this place of looking for a way to have sustainable funding to do that work across all habitat types. And so that's kind of where the Conservation and Recreation Fund story begins. In 2015, there was a major budget shortfall for the Department of Fish and Wildlife across all areas, but really highlighted how we don't have a sustainable funding model to pay for conservation work because so much of the department's budget comes from licenses and fees related to harvest. So the legislature created an alternative funding task force in 2016 with a pretty diverse membership, including members of the legislature itself, and tasked them with sort of looking to the future for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. How would the department fully meet its mission to protect and enhance fish, wildlife, and their habitats for present and future generations? And how do we pay for it? And so the Alternative Funding Task Force worked throughout 2016. They came up with the idea of an Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund with a broad set of purposes that would seek to implement the Oregon Conservation Strategy and engage more Oregonians in Oregon's outdoors and fish and wildlife opportunities. So sort of create the next generation of conservationists. They put two funding proposals out there. One was an income tax surcharge, and one was a bottled beverage related fee in ways that tried to engage all Oregonians in contributing to the fund. And they were seeking to generate $87 million per biennium with those funding opportunities. So in 2017, there was an attempt, a piece of legislation that went for the bottled beverage opportunity. And there really wasn't political will to make that happen. Many of the legislators on the task force have since left the legislature and sort of left behind Representative Ken Helm, who's the last member of the task force who's still in the legislature. And in 2019, he introduced a bill to create the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund and the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Advisory Committee to help direct expenditures from the fund. And he sought general fund to start the account with the idea that we would demonstrate what we can do with the money and look to put a more permanent fund source on it in the future. And so that sort of set us in motion with this program. And I guess an important point, the bill did pass, but in the Ways and Means Committee, they changed it from $2 million of general fund to $1 million of general fund if and only if the Department of Fish and Wildlife first deposited $1 million into the account. So to sort of set up a major capital campaign fundraising challenge It also put a sunset date of the end of this biennium, which is coming quickly in June. And so the way we saw it, we had to create a brand new advisory committee. We had to raise $1 million and spend $2 million this biennium. And then the final major twist in the program is that during 2020, in the special session related to COVID funding, our $1 million general fund appropriation was lost, along with special appropriations throughout the state's budget. And so we launched our campaign in early 2019, intending it to be a series of large events. The first one was hosted by a variety of outdoor recreation partners in Bend. The next one was going to be hosted by the governor, and then the pandemic kicked in and everything changed. We pivoted in the spring of 2019 from seeking large donations, particularly from the outdoor recreation sector, to one that could really demonstrate broad support from Oregonians, $10 from 100,000 people, adding up to our $1 million challenge. So we launched OregonIsAlive.org. Encourage you to check it out, and I can share it on my screen if you're interested, as part of the crowdfunding campaign. And so we've been working on that since it's been about a year since that launched. And we, to date, in hand, we have just about $400,000 from over 17,000, approaching 18,000 individual contributions. The average small contribution is about $8.50. And then we've got a variety of foundations that have participated, including the Oregon Community Foundation. And so we're doing pretty well on that fundraising campaign. We no longer technically have our $1 million goal set by the legislature because that general fund is not there. But at the time we lost that $1 million of general fund, there was a promise put in the record that it is the intent of the legislature to match everything that we raise. So the amount of funds we generate through June, that the legislature will put that general fund back for the next biennium. So we do still have a reason to raise as much as we can. And that's part of why we're here to talk with you today. And then the other piece I wanted to give by way of sort of background and what's happening now is that there are 2 pieces of legislation still alive this legislative session that would remove our sunset date, so that we would no longer have sort of this looming June end of the program, and would restore our $1 million of general fund match, which would match everything we've raised this session and then leave room for us to continue working on that challenge. So those are House Bill 2171 and House Bill 2913. They both passed out of the House Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee and are on their way to the Joint Committee on Ways and Means. So that's sort of the history of the program and the fundraising. And then the other piece here is the advisory committee and expenditures we've made from that account. So the governor appointed members of the advisory committee in January, including Laura for the nearshore and Coast Range position. And we lost Laura in the pandemic changes as well, which is very reasonable. Our first meeting actually was in March, and right when the governor reached out to all staff to tell us we needed to cancel everything. The members of the committee were so excited about this work that we had a resounding, let's figure it out. And it was one of our first virtual public meetings that the department hosted because of that interest in getting this going. So Dr. Wenner was elected as the chair of the advisory committee. So I'll turn it over to him to tell you about sort of what the committee's been up to and expenditures we've made so far.
Yeah, thanks, Davia. That's a brief overview of all the work that went into creating this fund in hopes to come up with long-term solutions. We knew the stakes were really quite high and the members were willing to put a lot of work in. And in fact, I think we've been resoundingly successful in the 1 year that we've been in operation, despite a pandemic and economic recession, a state on fire, and crazy election time. we were able to raise close to $500,000 in that time. Not only raise that funds, but we realized how important it was to get that money on the ground. We immediately started a process where we could vet appropriate projects across the state, and we've had 2 funding rounds and have distributed a large amount of that money that's on the ground working on projects, again, that are designed to address the Oregon conservation strategy and many of the species that are just kind of being left behind. So it's been a great experience for us, and we feel we proved that Oregonians care about this, care about it enough to donate like they did and step to the plate despite all the things that were going on. We're really quite disappointed that the senator had to leave, because he is going to very soon be part of determining our fate. We'd love to have a little bit more time to talk to him. We are before the Joint Committee of Ways and Means and the Natural Resources Subcommittee, looking at that $1 million for our match, but we also are trying to get more. I mean, we're just rolling. We're just getting started. And part of this discussion, I think, leads to our work with Laura and hopefully with the OST in terms of fundraising and making some exciting things happen on the coast, and particularly the Marine Reserve Program project that you all have, or that has been submitted to us. I think we have a framework and some opportunities to work together to make it a collaborative, synergistic process. So we're quite excited about that. Just to bring you up to date there, in our second round, we received an application to help fund the report on the Oregon Marine Reserve Program that was mandated by the legislature, but not funded by the legislature. And so it was very nice for us to be able to participate in that. In fact, the committee met and vetted. This was one of 65 proposals that we received, and we vetted those projects and selected the Marine Reserve Project as one of our awards. Unfortunately, because of our limited budget, we had to limit that amount to $10,000. And in fact, we had 65 projects, 30 of them of which we really felt were worthy. And the total ask was $500,000. And at the time we had $60,000 in the bank. So we went ahead and decided to try to raise the rest of that money through the rest of the biennium. And we are been quite successful with that. The Marine Reserve Project has moved up and is now getting close to being funded. And in addition, I think something more important for us to discuss, and I think Laura wanted us to touch on, was we have also set up a program with the promise of this match that we have coming to us for the funds that we raise. We realized that we could really incentivize donors to help with that match, to encourage them to contribute to projects like the Marine Reserve Project. Steve Marks, I'd like to thank Pew Charitable Trust for its work with us, and it's the fact that it thought enough of us to give us a grant of $60,000 towards the Gilchrist Wildlife Underpass, which was done earlier this year. They did that in part because they recognized that there was going to be a match to that. Now that at that time, that match was going to be unrestricted and would just be distributed at our discretion. Despite the fact that it didn't particularly go back to that project, Pew was willing to work with us very early on. That gave us a tremendous credibility, and their trust in us has really been a major benefit for us moving forward. And we've now established relationships with the Oregon Community Fund, Meyer Memorial Trust. We're working with REI. We're working with Keene. We have some very, very good partners moving forward. And again, Steve, I just wanted to point out how integral Pew was to that whole process. So we really appreciate that. But we also realized that we might be more effective in incentivizing donors. And we have recently formalized a process where large donors are able to give us restricted donations. That is, they can give a donation for a specific project, particularly one that we have already accepted and vetted, or one that we would evaluate and vet for its suitability to our framework and our mandate. And we would then turn around and apply 30% of the match that we would get for those funds directly to that particular project. In other words, using the Marine Reserve as an example, we have promised $10,000 to that project. But in this scenario, if we could work together and raise donations to help fund the rest of that were channeled through the OCRF, when we get our match, assuming that that occurs, then we would redirect 30% of that match to that specific project. So a simple number would be, let's say we raised $100,000. That money would come through the fund, go directly to the project, and then when the match is forthcoming, another $30,000 would go directly to that project. And of course, that leaves $70,000 for us to spend around the state for appropriate projects. So it's true one-to-one match. But that 30% has proven to be really influential and helpful in incentivizing donors. We've already had a couple of 5-figure donations fulfilling that need, and we're working on several 6-figure donations. At this point, we feel we're going to hit the $1 million mark sometime in the very early next biennium, say by September or October. So we're really quite pleased with the Oregonians in general response, as well as the large established organizations in the state. So that's a quick update of where we are. We're really excited to be part of this. You folks were mentioning working together and cooperating with Lisa's organization, and we would like to be part of that. We feel like we can help be a solution to Oregon's problems and do so in a big way. We expect to grow. We expect us to become a focal point for conservation in the state, and we really look forward to working with you. So that's a quick summary, not that quick, but as quick as we can make it, of where we stand. And I'd love to have further discussion, particularly about the Marine Reserve Project. And Laura, where you see us fitting in on that?
Great. Well, thank you both for that overview. Kind of a story of survival, really, for this organization to buck the odds all year and come to this point with not only still standing, but really surging forward. So I want to commend you both on your leadership for that. It was such a great group of people that came together in March to work on the bones of the organization and come up with a set of principles that could be applied fairly and impartially to projects to make sure that funds were being distributed properly. And I'm sorry, I recall those meetings in late March when I was sitting in this very office and my business was closed, and I didn't know what was going on inside the building. We had things happening there, and I'd be on this meeting and people would be in these very intense discussions about really like the basics of like, what is conservation and recreation, and what do we really mean, and what are we really doing? And I wanted so much to be there, but after the second meeting, I was like, I'm just not here at all. I knew that I couldn't contribute in a meaningful way at that time. But I'm so grateful that the organization persisted through, and I've been so fascinated with this model of micro donations for quite a long time, since technology has really enabled that to happen. It's really cool to see a large body of people contributing even in small ways to something, just in terms of building our sense of community and our sense of ownership over conservation and recreation in the state. So I want to defer to our board members first on questions, and if that doesn't come up, I might ask for a little bit of follow-up on how that micro donation process works and doesn't work from you. But first off, I'll just open it up to the board members, and as before, any members of the public, just type your name in the chat if you want to ask a question, and I'll call on you when we get to that point. So it is open to the board.
I'll get going. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was kind of an unbelievable path to get to where you are right now. And I think to some degree, the trust feels your pain, because we've also, been wrestling a lot with what needs to happen, and then how can we actually get that to happen. And I was really delighted because I wear these two hats here, certainly sitting here with the trust, but also with the stack that's managing the Marine Reserves assessment process. It was great that the trust wanted to pick that assessment process up, because of, there wasn't the support coming in from the state, but we still had the obligation. And I'm certainly very appreciative of the attention coming in from the fund to help move that forward. I'm really I'm pleased that Lisa is also on this, because we are moving forward with the process. We hope to move forward with the chosen university proposal process in the next month or so, and then really get that going. So we'll see this thing that's been kind of sort of articulated in legislation, but not really actually kind of come to fruition. And it seems like that type of partnership where sort of needs have been identified, and there's this collaboration in order to get into how we actually support these, that seems like yes, it would be great if we could just get a big bunch of money from the state. But in the absence of that, having this very collaborative process, I think it really sort of typifies kind of the Oregon way. And I guess when we think about the partnerships between the trust and the fund, perhaps we can have a conversation about, well, what are the priorities that have come out of the work that the trust has done? Are there synergies there with the priorities from the fund? And, are there opportunities there for that type of partnership to help get some of these things supported and moved forward? So I'll stop there.
Shelby, I appreciate that very much, and I hope that you are right, that we can form that type of relationship, because then we're much more powerful. We have a mandate across the entire state, and we have representatives from each ecoregion, but we would look to organizations like yours to help us in our prioritizing. So having that relationship would be very beneficial. We've funded several projects on the coast, including the Marine Reserve Project, but also we funded the Alaka Alliance Sea Otter Reintroduction Project, and we are funding a coastal beaver project, specifically looking at beaver and coho salmon on the coast. So we have very, despite Laura bailing on us and leaving us in the lurch, we still have a very serious interest in the coast, and fortunately the governor just appointed Kelly Timchak, who is, I believe, from the more southern coast, to our committee. So we do have representation, but even with that, we would certainly want to have a relationship and work with you going forward with prioritizing.
Great. Steve, anything on your mind for these two?
No, thanks for the update. And I really appreciate the information. And yeah, likewise, I was not directly involved with the Gilchrist Underpass project, but knew that it was happening, and we'll pass on that on to the leads on that. And likewise, with our contributions to the Marine Reserve Assessment Program, we'll look forward to keeping in touch and making sure that's a robust process as possible. But yeah, just thanks for all the amazing work that you put into getting that fund up and off the ground, despite a lot of the challenges that you described, some of which I knew a little bit about, some of which I knew nothing about. So I'm kind of blown away that you've been able to get to where you are now. So thanks, Davia and Carl.
Well, thank you for that. And again, we're quite disappointed that the senator had to leave, because truly our fate is going to be decided in the next couple of months. And Senator Anderson is going to be a key part of that. So if you folks have, and we have actually reached out to him, he's very busy and have not been able to get an audience with him particularly. But we'd love to be able to communicate with him and tell him what we're trying to do. Seems like he is very interested in this and could be a great ally for us. So if any of you all have a connection, please help us make that connection.
Yeah, Dr. Winter, in the spirit of that, I think it would be appropriate for me to reach out to Senator Anderson and let him know how much we appreciated his brief presence. We knew it wasn't going to be for the whole meeting, and share with him the main talking points of your presentation, and request for us to have an opportunity to schedule a time to talk to him and make sure that he understands what the trust's relationship is to the OCRF, and just how much synergy is possible if this were fully funded and able to continue.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you very much if you're able to do that. Hey, Christina. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Hello. In a completely different context than the Klamath.
Yeah, I know Christina from past efforts in the Klamath Basin.
Yeah, decades. But yes, I also wanted to echo what Steve and Shelby said, that we were very well aware of what you're doing, but the level of complexity and challenges that you faced over this last year is pretty daunting. And so I was wondering if I could ask Laura, when you are going in front of the committee, the Natural Resources Subcommittee of Ways and Means, there's an opportunity for public comment. Is that something that we might want to consider doing in terms of supporting your budget request?
Yeah, I'm not sure how the process works. But we would love to have your input on that. I know that in the previous, when we were before the House Natural Resources Subcommittee, there were opportunities for comment, and whether that's going to be the case in Ways and Means, I'm not sure, but man, we would love that. That would be wonderful. We really get part of what we want to do. We certainly want that $1 million match for what we've raised, and I think we're going to get that. I honestly do. But what we need more. We need the next step. We need another $1 million, basically, because we've spent this year making the relationships and building the base. We're ready to go. If we just were to get the $1 million, we'll be done less than halfway through the biennium. So we're very interested in trying to help that process and educate those members of our needs and how we can, we can leverage those state funds with donated money. We feel confident we could do that. And it's been, I will say, you all are giving us a lot of coups for what we've achieved, but what we've done is just demonstrated how important this is to Oregonians, and we gave Oregonians an opportunity to show that. That's really what this story is about. I'm not sure if Davia gave you that number, but we've had 17,000 individual donations to the Oregon Conservation Recreation Fund. So all we've done is shown that this is important and meaningful to Oregonians, and that we need to make this real. We need to fund this. We need to make it happen because it's important to us. And that's the real kudos go to Oregonians for supporting us. They're the ones that got us where we are.
Sorry, Lee here. I missed the context. What's the program goal or context?
The program goal of the OCRF. Davia, you want to?
Lee, this is Laura Anderson. I'm the chair, and if you, I think you just jumped on, and I usually ask members of the public to just type their name into the chat bar, and if there's time after the board has had the chance to direct questions to the speakers, then I do call on members of the public. So that's just a point of process that we have here for our OOST meetings, if that's agreeable for you. Thank you. And it looks like Jim stepped away for a moment. I would just follow up Dr. Winter and Davia by saying if you could help me in terms of tracking, I'm sure Davia, that's part of your role, is to track the bill as it moves through the legislature. I'd be happy to write a letter on behalf of the OOST. I presume there's no objection to that, in support of the bill. I know that the public testimony has been extremely limited this session due to time constraints. If there's an opportunity to do Zoom public testimony, I'd be happy to. I am showing up for the House Bill 3114, which has OOST directly in it already. So I could do that too if you just want to keep me posted on that movement. There are other questions regarding the relationship between OOST and OCRF right now, or the Marine Reserves project as it stands from any of the board or speakers. This is a good opportunity just to make sure we're all on the same page as this big project moves forward.
Well, I just appreciate the opportunity that we'll be able to start our work together through the Marine Reserves grant, and then we'll see how far we can take that and see where else there is going to be a nexus of our work. So thank you for that.
Great, Steve, and then I think Shelby.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. Yeah, no, following up on that, I am curious, it wasn't directly on the agenda, but was hoping to get an update to the extent that there is one on how that RFP process is going and where things sit. And Dr. Walker, you just mentioned maybe in a couple months, we might there might be an institution or an entity selected. But any information you're able to share, I think would be, I'd certainly be interested.
So to that point, I'm going to make a recommendation that we make a little bit of an adjustment. We're scheduled for a 1:30 break and then 1:45 public comment. Because I know we're all diehards, I'm going to recommend that we just take the opportunity to ask these questions and provide that update. I might ask Shelby to provide that update for all of us. That way we can just stay on the call until the 1:45 public comment, and we should be able to close shortly thereafter. Does that sound okay? All right. Yeah. Shelby, either way, a direct question that you had or a response to Steve's request for an update?
No direct question, but I'm happy to provide an update. Thanks to the support from the fund, as well as Pew and several other donors, we were able to get sufficient funding for the Marine Reserves assessment, as had been estimated by the Science and Technical Advisory Committee. And if you recall, that is the group that is charged with managing the process for the assessment. It is not doing the process. That falls under the purview of the public university, and public university is one of Oregon's public university as indicated in legislation. And what we've been doing as the committee has been for the past few years now, developing the criteria and the RFP language. So all of that is publicly accessible. We've had to make just a few tweaks to the language to make sure that we are reflective of any kind of considerations coming from the Oregon Community Foundation, which is sort of hosting the bulk of the dollars, and recognizing the decision process whereby INR, as we heard from Lisa, will be running the RFP process. They will be providing a recommendation to STAC. STAC will then be providing a recommendation to the trust, and the trust will then be providing the recommendation to the foundation for approval. So that type of language is what we needed to tweak in the RFP. We are maybe a teensy bit behind the original timeline indicated in the RFP, but I'm reasonably comfortable with where we are right now, because the synthesis document that will be the basis for the assessment will not be delivered by ODF&W until January of next year. So fall is really intended to be the time where the public university team can do any kind of background information, reviewing scientific literature or existing data sets or anything along those lines. So we have a little bit of flexibility in that process. Where things stand specifically right now is, of the funds that were provided, a small pot was provided to INR to run the proposal review process. And so they will be hopefully kicking that out the door in terms of notification of opportunity within the next few weeks. That will include things like a web page, FAQs, opportunities to ask questions. Then there will be, sort of the proposal development period, then submission, and then we'll have the review process. As you might expect, it's going to be an interesting process. STAC wants to make sure that this is as robust as we can make it, recognizing that Oregon's a really small place. So people have lots of conflicts all over the place. So it will likely include lots of technical reviewers who don't have the same type of conflict that you might expect from folks inside the state. And then we'll have that conversation. The recommendation will be provided to STAC and move along the chain that I just described. STAC has been considering external reviewers, and there's a list that is being built, again, also available on the public site. I think with that, that's pretty much where we are. It's been really great to be able to see this process beginning for something that we've been planning for a while now. My hope is that by mid-late summer, we'll have the public university team selected, and they'll begin to do their work. Questions?
All right, yeah, great update. I will just tell you that there is a flurry of email traffic between Shelby, Lisa Gaines, and Carlos Garcia, our program officer at the Oregon Community Foundation, on a weekly basis. And I'm very grateful that I have mostly the responsibility of reading and just being in the know, and that they are handling all the heavy lifting. We as UST do have to approve things at certain levels, and I've been able to do that no problem because of this team of professionals that so heavily vet every step in the process. So if we are a little bit behind schedule, it's only because everybody is dotting I's, crossing T's, and making sure that this is a bulletproof process. So thank you so much, Shelby, for you've worn so many hats on this. I think if we just get you on the OCF board, you might have a hat in every single circle of the Venn diagram that has become this. And to the value of the OCRF $10,000, it is so much more valuable than the dollar figure to this project. It may be a minor contribution to the overall budget of the project, but having some Oregon, what we say, skin in the game, is really heartening. It was really hard to find from the Oregon foundations because of shifting focal points with pandemic, wildfires, equity issues, and so forth. We were really struggling to get an Oregon, and I look at Steve over here because Pew is very much in Oregon and part of Oregon, but something that actually came with some kind of state ties to the state, even though they're private dollars. So I think that that has a lot of value for the organization. Are there others, other comments, questions from, yes, Carl?
Laura, I just wanted to reiterate, while we would love to have given more in that original round, with this new program that we have, we certainly have ways to help leverage your current donations. And we'd like to, we can certainly talk about that offline and figure out ways. I have talked to Carlos to some extent, and if there's ways we can help incentivize donors further, we would love to play that role and help you get to whatever finish line you need to get to on this.
Well, I think that we feel pretty confident that the RFP as written is going to be managed within the budget that we have committed. However, there are a lot of tangential parts of this that were left on the table, including additional monitoring, in particular for marine reserves, and other activities that are complementary to this process that can definitely be picked up as individual pieces and worked with OCRF. And your comment to how amenable that the Oregon Community Foundation has been, I couldn't agree more. They've worked very hard to really make this, you know, as successful as possible for getting these matching funds to work. Right. We have a couple minutes before public comment, and I didn't see, Leigh Anderson, that you put your name in the chat. If you do want to ask any question on this particular agenda item, now would be a good time, or if you wanted to wait until the public comment period for general comments, we'll open that in just a few moments. Right, and Lonnie reminds me that we have to wait. Oh, thank you, you did write in there. So Leigh, would you like to, or Lee, pardon me, I think I mispronounced your name. Would you like to ask a question?
Hi, yes, thank you, Laura. Good last name, by the way. So I was the primary author of the one of the Rocky Habitat proposals, which was really a coast-wide proposal for kelp restoration. And a lot of it centered around what the recreational divers of Oregon can do to help preserve this evolving kelp forest catastrophe that the Oregon coast is experiencing. I'm also heavily involved, along with some other divers, in an ODFW permit proposal to do some scientific urchin culling and measurements on 5 reefs, 3 in Southern Oregon, 2 in Northern Oregon. So as you can tell, we're all about kelp forests and at least saving a few reefs from the urchin overpopulation catastrophe. I was curious, one of our bottlenecks is doing baseline surveys of some select reef sites. I was wondering if there are any resources that could be brought to bear from your initiatives or funding your organization to help with baseline surveys on these 5 sites, assuming we do get the permit, which is looking quite likely, and maybe within a few weeks. Second area of interest and concern is marine reserves. In the Rocky Habitats initiative, there was a decision to wait on any consideration of marine reserves until 2023, which is hugely concerning because marine reserves are supposed to be, the ultimate protected status, but the way that works by default is urchins can rampage through the marine reserves and unrestricted, and we aren't getting a permit to even address reserves. So it's kind of a huge irony that the very sites that we decided in the 70s or whenever it was, so many years ago, should be most protected are the most vulnerable and most prohibited from remediation. So that's a giant concern. So that's, yeah, I'll leave it there for now. If anyone cares to comment on either baseline survey resources or if you share my concern about marine reserves getting devastated by urchin overpopulation and kelp forest near extinction.
I would just say that, so the OOST is not a policy making body.
Yeah,
so regarding policy making and marine reserves, that falls under ODF&W purview. As far as a funding entity, I would say from the OOST perspective, that is our purview, is to help find funding to support science, and baseline surveys of reef sites could be part of that. our current UST capacity doesn't have anything readily available for that. And that's something that we're going to have to talk about in our next meeting, is going to be about our capacity building for the future. But I might ask Davia to respond on behalf of the Oregon the Oregon Conservation Recreation Fund in regards to funding for baseline surveys of reef sites.
Thanks, Laura. And I'd say certainly that kind of work, it would be under the purview of the Conservation Recreation Fund. Kelp ecosystems is a key habitat in the Oregon Nearshore Strategy. And the OCRF is really focused on implementing the Oregon Conservation and Nearshore Strategies, with the caveat that if the program ends in June by our legislative sunset, there won't be new funding, a new project funding opportunities. If our sunset is removed by the legislature, very likely the next round of funding opportunity will be sometime this summer. And we'll certainly share that with the UST.
Okay, that's favorable.
So I'm gonna presume that we're including that Lonnie and Andrea under public comment, although it was just a few minutes before the public comment period. So to that, I'd ask if there are other members on the call, other public persons on the call that would like to give public comment. This is the time. You just type your name in the chat bar and I'll call on you. We'll give it just a moment for that.
Yeah, the second part of my question though was about marine reserves. If there are any thoughts on marine reserve protection from marauding urchins.
I'll just comment that I think that gets into the policy, and the Conservation Recreation Fund, like UST,
Yeah.
is a funding body.
Okay, so ODFW for that. Yeah.
I'm not the right person at ODF&W, but I can connect you with the right person.
Okay.
If you'd like that.
Yeah, just put it in the chat.
Great. I am not seeing any additional requests for public comment. So since we skipped our break, I don't have anything submitted from members for other business or for other agenda items. The one thing that I think we would have benefited from Senator Anderson's presence, or Representative Gomberg's presence on, would be to have a update on our House Bill 3114. Myself and several others, including Francis Chan and Jack Barth, gave testimony on March 18th to the House Committee on Ag and Natural Resources. That committee still has the bill. I think it's moving out of that committee. I understand the bill is alive, which is a good thing. That's really my update, is it's alive. It's probably going to need some more support to make it through a really tough Ways and Means process, as will the OCRF bill. So I'm committed to showing up for that, and I would ask our members to do what and as they can to support those two bills. Davia, what's the bill number for OCRF?
2171 and 2913.
I'm typing these in the chat for, those are all House bill numbers, correct?
They are, and 2171 is the governor's omnibus recreation bill. Okay. So it includes OCRF sunset removal and funding, as well as a slew of other governor's priorities related to recreation. House Bill 2913 is just an OCRF bill, but they would do the same things for OCRF.
Okay. Do any other of the members have any updates or insight into anything legislative or policy-wise or other updates? Yes, Davia.
I'll just say that House Bill 3114 is going to be voted on tomorrow by the House Ag and Natural Resources Committee. So there's not going to be an opportunity for public testimony, but you can watch that hearing and see how the vote goes. If they get to it, they've been holding things over a lot, so it could end up getting pushed, but tomorrow's the plan.
Excellent, great. And just, I guess the only other thing will be the queue up for the July 7th meeting will be our next meeting. And we will, at that point, probably have, we will know about the status of the Ocean Sciences Bill. If we are successful in that bill, and there's a chance that that this will come to fruition this year, the $1 million pass through the OOST is a great win for ocean conservation, and it could be exactly the breath of life that OOST needs to exercise our ability to leverage some administrative fund support off of that $1 million, at which point we could actually have enough money to go out and contract with a very motivated and connected person. It's the kind of person I envision that could take the OOST charge to the next level. So I'd like to plan to have some conversation around that in July. So be thinking about, if you know individuals that have a particular skill set and perhaps funding connections or ties that would be viable. If we're not successful in that funding, we can still fundraise the $50,000 to $100,000 that we would want to raise to get our administrative capacity kind of up. And just to kind of give you a quick sense of where one place where I really see this going is as I look around and I see organizations that are able to leverage private dollars. Like, we don't want to go out and try to get money from REI for the same work that OCRF is doing, right? We don't want to compete in any way. The point of OOST is to build. It's to build a funding base. And so I'd like to, I'm going to see if I can queue up some speakers. And if you have anybody that you know, if you could drop me an email, that would be great. But I would like to see us looking towards some of the federal dollar aspects of the stimulus package monies around energy, around climate change. I mean, some of these are $1 billion funds that are going to get filtered through to organizations. Is there a special role that OOST can fill in bringing these dollars into a coordinated space for the state so that we can use those with our partners like the OCRF, like INR, like the work that Lee Anderson and so many others are doing down on the South Coast. So that's just kind of where I'm gonna, hopefully we'll be going that direction in our next meeting. Is there any other business to conduct before we conclude our quarterly meeting here? See no's. And Christina, I hope you do not have another Zoom meeting after this one.
2 more.
Oh dear.
I get a break. The next one's at 3, so it's great.
We have a Tempur-Pedic chair. All right, very good. Well, thank you all, and thank you to Lonnie and Andrea and Ted from DSL for keeping us all on track and getting our meeting minutes taken and back out to us and so forth. So with that, we'll see you all July 7th. Please send me just directly an email if you have any help or direction you can give towards this agenda for July.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Thank you.
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Laura.
Winter.
Thank you for running a great meeting.
Thank
All
you.
right, bye.
Bye-bye.